Hi everyone. Hi, I'm JD from US.
Hi everyone, I'm Abi from Canada.
Welcome to episode 7 of Wasted Wanderers, where we discuss the biggest news off the beaten track, covering tech, politics, economics, and business. Let's get started. Abhijit, how are you doing?
Doing great, JD. Thanks for that great intro. And yeah, it's been a pretty lovely Sunday here in Vancouver. All right, guys, let's get started with our first story. Let me pull that up. So we're going to talk about the curious case of the block AI layoffs. And as we peel this onion, we are going to discover that okay, AI might just be the latest buzzword, not just in terms of the skill sets you need, uh, but also in terms of trying to right size your companies. So JD, go for it.
Yeah, this is an interesting story. So, Jack Dorsey, CEO of Block, announced he's laying off 4,000 employees. So, that's around 50% of the whole company. And the reason he gave on Twitter was that the AI tools have been getting so good that we he doesn't need that many employees, so all the jobs are redundant. He gave a good payout to everybody. I think they got like at least 4 months of severance, uh, plus accelerated stocks schedule. So that's good for them. But this story is mainly about, was it actually due to AI, or is it because of something that experts are now calling AI washing? So, uh, the announcement here is very at the center of this complex debate over AI and future of work. Like on one side, there's like a genuine fear that technology will displace jobs, and on the other there's like some deep cynicism that companies are exploiting that fear to just dress up old fashioned cost cutting as technological futurism. And we can see that Block expanded their headcount over the pandemic. So in 2020, they had 5,000 employees. And by 2025, they had 10,000 employees. So, like double. So now they just reduced it to half. And now that is scaring off a lot of investors in the tech market. uh, as you can see, the tech stocks are down because of this news plus some other news. So there is some interesting play going here and there. Yeah, would love to hear your thoughts, Abhijit.
So what I think here is I guess AI can do a lot of the code writing, right? It's gotten pretty good at it, especially if you're doing one of the mainstream languages, your Python, Golang, um, Scala, Rust. I don't know about Rust, but all the common ones, right? Your TypeScripts, JavaScripts of the world. AI can produce code pretty well. I would, I'll stick my neck out and say even the C's and C++s and Javas can be written out pretty well by AI. But that is about 20% of a software engineer's job. The rest 80% goes in navigating stakeholders, making sure that they understand clients' needs and then put them in some sort of a feature within a software, and then rolling it out in such a way or designing that feature in such a way that it talks to all the other components of the application in a meaningful manner. Can AI do all that? Bullshit. Because I recently was putting together a proposal for a client. I can't give any specifics here, obviously, but I was trying to use, the internally approved flavor of Copilot to get some stuff done. and the amount of time it just gave total rubbish. What happens is you try to use an LLM, it'll generate some really nice sounding text, it'll be grammatically accurate, it will sound very professional, but if you don't read it, you run into the risk of putting out things that just don't make much sense, hallucinations, right? So coming
Yeah.
back to this is just I like JD's term, right? AI washing. So when this happens with every new toy on the block, right? Everyone is trying to use this toy for literally everything to try and increase revenues, to try and cut down costs. In this case, we're just seeing a way for them to try and cut down costs. You look at all you look at all the Max 7 companies that have been doing mass layoffs over the past couple of years. New data is suggesting that they're just hiring all those positions back, but in lower cost center markets, specifically India, right? So when I see this, and if we go down the story and we read it, right? Basically, I guess he's laying off 50%, and then he wanted to retain this one person to whom he was willing to give a 75% increase, and then with a one-time bonus, it was a 90% increase. My hunch is he wants to retain that person so that he can hire a team in India, and this key right hand person that he retains here runs that team. Again, I have no way to prove this, but this is what I feel is happening. There's a lot of burn that has come across because of AI based layoffs, but now companies are like, okay, if we want to hire those same people back, or if we want to hire the same people in the American market, it's just the cost will not the cost model won't work for them. Why it won't work for them? Because once you have already showed improved numbers for the past 2-3 quarters because of so-called AI layoffs, you can't suddenly say sorry we were wrong. You never accept your mistake on Wall Street. So now you have to hire more people, but you can't hire them at the rates that you were paying them before, because your costs go up, but not necessarily your revenue. So you need another way to hire them. That's my take.
Yeah, yeah, and I totally agree with that. I think this is a ploy by CEO. Uh, what has happened is there was some over hiring over COVID and also in this AI boom. And I read somewhere that one of the reasons for some layoffs is these are executives who expect big efficiency gains from AI, but they have not been realized yet. So they've sunk all this money into these AI initiatives, and it has brought up productivity a little bit, but not as much as they were expecting. Like, remember, like a year or two ago, we were promised that AI is going to change everything. Like, we are going to be living in the future and nobody needs to work anymore. And, everything is going to be kumbaya. But that's not what's happening. We have now come to realize that AI is a productivity gain, but way more muted than we thought. So it's affecting some industries more than the other. Like, I read a report somewhere, like the US companies, they announced, I think, around 100K job cuts in January. So that was more than usual. Stocks are down. Tech stocks are down, as I said before, especially SaaS company stocks. Um, and so people are wondering, like, is this AI gravy train over? Um, I want to tell the audience a really interesting quote I heard somewhere about this block AI layoffs. So
Company
imagine
stocks.
imagine like uh, you are eating, McDonald's every day, eating pizza every day, and in a year you gain 40 pounds, right? You become really heavy. And then a year later, you're like, okay, now I need to hit the gym. I need to uh, eat salad and shed these 40 pounds. Whereas if you eat healthy constantly throughout the year, eat healthy food, exercise regularly, then after a year, you don't need to shed those 40 pounds because you'll be lean. So the block company is the former. Like it gained a lot of weight and now it's trying to shed all of it all of a sudden. So it's not healthy, whatever they're trying to do. And this is not how a usual company behaves. So yeah, those are my 2 cents on the matter.
Just before we move on to the next one, I was reading, or I'm in the process of reading Ray Dalio's principles, and he categorizes systems into three categories. One of them is expert systems, which which by his own statements is like, okay, that's what we use at Bridgewater Associates. And then he has this whole decision making framework on, and then once you get to that, how you convert it into an algorithm and then use the computer. But the second category of systems he points out is what's called mimicking systems. So I would say at this point, at least the LLM space, they are good at mimicking stuff. You have a meeting going on, you have already discussed all the content, you want a summary, ergo, i.e., recreate that in just a different format, it'll do that really well. Hundreds and millions of programmers have put in code on Stack Overflow, GitHub, and all the other publicly hosted repositories. AI can take that and then repackage it based on a prompt that you give it. And same thing with image generation. Although I would say image generation is one space where at least some originality is coming out, that okay, it can actually create an image based on a prompt. But the image it will create will also be around things that it has already seen before. It can join them together, which is, these are all great things, but it still cannot replace a whole job, a whole job profile, because every job eventually will come down to, okay, what's the uniqueness? What uniqueness do you bring to the table? What's new? Not every job all the time is about mimicking. So I'll rest my case on that. I guess we can go to the next one. So this one here is from Canada. So zero population growth expected in Canada this year, budget watchdog. So projection mainly due to lower non-permanent resident admissions. See, I don't see any of this as a surprise, right? I don't, I mean, yeah, it's come out in the open, but I think this has been something that, well, I think Canadians were wanting this for the past few years and now we are getting it. But the more alarming aspect that I want to highlight is that if, as a country, we have to rely on external people to grow our population, then we are already at the starting point of where Japan has been for the past, I think, 2 or 3 decades now, right? Or where South Korea is headed. Of course, it doesn't, I mean, at this point, it's pretty well known that fertility rates are low in all over the Western world. But what needs to be understood is, at the end of the day, too much government interference in by way of collecting taxes leads people to not be able to afford stuff. Once people can't afford stuff, they'll have kids later. If they have kids later, fewer and fewer of them will actually even have kids, or maybe, more than one kid. You need minimum two just to be at replacement rate. But if again, too much, if there's very little disposable income, affording kids gets harder. And I'm sorry, none of these social programs around funding childcare, funding daycare, none of this is working out. All of this money goes to paying inflated salaries to government workers, right? And there are countless number of lives I've done on this on the other channel. Please go look at those. The number of employees who earn more than $150,000 per year went up by I think by 80-90% in 2025. And there was a whole article on it, and I discussed that in detail. So ultimately, if taxes can be lowered, and Canada just needs to give up this pipe dream of a 100% socialized healthcare system. It is not leading anywhere. There is literally a dearth of medical facilities in all the rural areas of Canada. There are literally ERs that close down because they just don't have doctors. For anyone who's following Canadian news closely, there was a horrifying incident at Tumbler Ridge. There's a whole article in Vancouver Sun about how there was literally no psychological help, no medical help, nothing there in that town. And it was literally a rarity for that town to see five, psychotherapists to show up there at one time. At max, they used to have one before that incident. It's not working. We literally need a hybrid model where the government can focus on areas where private investment doesn't want to go. And then obviously we'll have a lot of private hospital options, private healthcare options come up in the major cities so that the stress on the government just reduces. I know there's a lot of other topics that link into this, like over unionization. But yeah, we can discuss that in another one. JD, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just reading this article. So apparently, there's some person, parliamentary budget officer. First of all, like Canada has way too many government employees, and I don't even understand what half of them do. But, anyways, this PBO predicts the non permanent resident population will decline by 385,000 this year and by another 289,000 people in 2027. Now, this is not counting another thing that they just started, which is to accelerate around 33,000 temporary worker visas into PRs. I think this is for people um, whose visas are expiring this year or the next year. They're creating some sort of a temporary program. So this is not including that. So very interesting fact. But the PBO projects that Canada's population will grow by 0.3% in 2027 and then zero point 0.8 after that, which is basically nothing. Like zero point 0.3 is nothing. So why is this happening? Well, as Abhijit explained and we've talked about in podcast before, this has been happening for a while. Like Canada, as with other advanced economies, have an aging population. Now, the Trudeau government was really smart in masking this fact by opening the gates and letting anybody and their family come in as a immigrant, either as students or as workers or what have you. And that led to a fake consumption based GDP growth. So this included increasing in housing, grocery prices, education. So it looked good on paper, like, oh, people are buying and people are visiting, so the GDP is good. But it was all fake because it was all dependent on immigrants. Now, if he would have made these smart immigrants stay and actually become entrepreneurs or like contribute to the economy, it would have been a good price. Like, yes, the economy would have still gone ahead and be good, but that's not what happened. The gravy train stopped, and all of a sudden you start seeing these warning signs like, oh, zero population growth, housing has stagnated, people are not coming in for education, and some people are panicking. How is that happening? Well, it's happening because it was masked, and that is not what was actually true. And then, as Abhijit explained, instead of doubling down on getting the basics of the economy right, the Trudeau government like had their own plan about free dental, free medical stuff, and things like that, which is just like adding fuel to the fire. Like all this is going to add to the deficit. So I don't see a easy way out, even though the current Prime Minister, Carney, is really good. He's an economist, but he has a really, really tough task ahead of him. Like, I don't know how he's going to wiggle Canada out of this. He's trying. But yeah, I mean, anybody could have seen this coming.
I
Yeah,
mean,
Abhijit, any
I mean,
thoughts?
yeah, PM Carney has a tough, tough time ahead of him. He's not only, I mean, not just PM Carney, like the whole cabinet, right? Yeah, there is no easy answers here because you have so much internal pressure to reduce immigration that if they blatantly went nuts like they did from starting 2022 onwards, the government will literally fall. Right now, no one has absolute majority in the Canadian Parliament. And if immigration goes beyond a reasonable number, then the opposition literally just gets a reason to try and trigger an election or a no confidence or something. Now, the mechanics of how it might work out or not, that's not, we're not going to discuss that. But so far, this government has taken a lot of right steps. Unfortunately, with CUSMA negotiations and with, you know, just the global situation, like gas prices are already up in Canada. So, or at least here in BC, it's I know the federal government at least is reducing its workforce. Even the BC provincial government is reducing its workforce, and these things are moving in the right direction. Are they going at the pace that I, as a civilian, would like to see? Probably not. But I also understand that it can't happen overnight. Like there was literally 10 whole years of rubbishry. And just like with everything else in life, right? It's very easy for things to come crashing down, but it takes literally double the amount of time to build them back up. So, long story short, it's just gonna take time. And it's not only gonna take time, this way of working will have to extend across elections and across party lines, assuming another government comes in. Anyways, guys, let's go to the next one for today. JD, do you want to kick us off for this one? This is your
Sure.
wheelhouse, AI and software.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, so this is a very interesting turn of events. Uh, so I think, in my view, we just witnessed a historic first through Silicon Valley. The US government has officially designated the American AI leader Anthropic, which makes Claude AI model and agent, as a supply chain risk. So, what does this mean? This label is usually reserved for foreign adversaries. It's been used for Chinese companies like Huawei, but never for an American company. But it was triggered after a massive breakdown in negotiation over a 200 million defense contract. So, here, this article is basically written by the CEO of Anthropic, Dario, and he is saying like he refused to let their AI, Claude, be used for fully autonomous lethal weapons. So things like uh, actually killing civilians or monitoring or surveilling US uh, citizens. So he was against that. And in response, the Department of War effectively blacklisted them, and declaring that, like, this company is a supply chain risk. So it's interesting because when, as a company, you're a supply chain risk, uh, the repercussions are massive. It's anybody who is using your model or who is using you uh, in any setting also cannot work with the US government. So that's a very interesting supply chain risk. So anybody who's using Claude model cannot work for or work with the US uh, government, which is crazy. Like, you can imagine like how much Claude touches our lives these days, especially if you're in engineering. Claude is like the number one AI model. So you can use Claude for your personal business, but the administration is making us choose a side. So this is a choose a side moment for the tech industry. And as Anthropic is being pushed out, we are seeing competitors like OpenAI and XAI step in, agreeing to the Pentagon's demand for unrestricted access in exchange for those massive government contracts. So this is like the background. Yeah, love to hear your thoughts on this, Abhijit.
So what I think is there is, let me try and steelman the government's argument first, right? Because the most recent All In episode, I forgot, they got in someone from the Department of War, and he's very close to the Secretary of War. I just can't remember the gentleman's name. But his argument, and I'm paraphrasing and summarizing here, is that if the Department of War, Defense, whatever it's called these days, if they have to use a technology, they have to be able to use it whenever they want and however they want. As long as they are paid and they are sticking to the contract, they cannot be using. They cannot be they cannot have restricted access, right? Now, Anthropic is saying that there will have to be exceptions provided, and if you just tell us what that is, we will grant you those. The Department of War's argument is that in effect makes them the Secretary of War, not the government or not the administration, right? Because if they have to rely on Claude or Anthropic's granting of an exception, then it kind of defeats the purpose. Anthropic has a clear stand that they don't want to, I guess they don't want to be a part of, or they don't want their technology to be a part of, funding wars or in some form or the other. They just don't want their technology going into, using for too much
Surveillance.
surveillance of American citizens and whatnot. And if they give like a free hand to the Department of War, then they will essentially not know if their technology was even used. The way I see it is it will only be bad for Anthropic because there are too many options on the table. Typically, in any highly regulated space like defense or healthcare or aviation and all these highly regulated spaces, you have to have three uh, like a triple layer redundancy of sorts. So if one fails, the other one can be used, and if the second one fails, there's a third. There's a plan A, plan B, plan C, maybe even a D and a E. Now let's put Anthropic out of the equation completely. Okay, there is OpenAI, there is XAI, there is Perplexity, but Perplexity may not work just because it wraps Claude, essentially. There is Gemini. So, and then there is a sleuth of open source models that the government could just have their coders look at to make sure that none of this information is being transmitted overseas, and then they can still deploy those and have it as their plan D, plan E, just because at least the lights are on. So there are too many options, and Anthropic stands to lose at the end of the day with this. They can still have their private clients, I guess. I'm curious though, how will this work with Palantir? Because Palantir is massively with the government. I'm not sure if Palantir uses anything Anthropic related in their models, but again, I want to know that part of the story as well. But bottom line is, whichever way this goes, Anthropic may gain some brownie points with the social media and the influencing landscape, but ultimately it'll translate into no revenue for them just because influencers can't pay them that much money. Yeah, there is also a whole thing going around that okay, Anthropic wanted this to blow out of proportion so that they can be seen as the good guys on the block. I'm not sure how much of that is true or false. In this official declaration, which we have on the screen here, they did sort of apologize for that it was an internal chain that got leaked. But again, guys, cheap publicity will not give you bottom line. Hard contracts for which there is a buyer willing to pay you, that's what gives you revenue. I mean, you're a startup. I don't know if Anthropic's bottom line is positive or not, but we keep hearing these things, OpenAI burning through billions of dollars. I don't know what's true for Anthropic or not. I haven't seen their financial statements, but ultimately, if the money doesn't show up in the next 6 to 12 months, my this is my hypothesis. If the money doesn't show up in terms of returns or in terms of positive bottom lines for all these AI companies in the next 6 to 12 months, the bubble will burst. AI will stay as a technology, the bubble will burst. Same thing as .com.
Yeah, yeah. I think I agree with you there. Uh, Sam Altman from OpenAI, um, Elon Musk from XAI, Dario from Anthropic. All these three companies have a upcoming IPO. You know, there's going to be trillions of dollars raised in the market, and they are playing really smart here. But they also have to be kind of curious. And one thing you mentioned was Palantir. Uh, from what I've heard, is using Claude, but because of this, they might need to remove them from their system. So Anthropic needs to be careful here. Um, and another weird thing that I think Trump said, or someone from the Department of Defense slash War said, was even though Anthropic is now a security risk, they are simultaneously threatening to use the Defense Production Act, which is a really interesting act in the US that can force a company to hand over its underlying technology and strip out its safety guardrails. So that means the administration is essentially saying that the tech is too dangerous to trust, but too powerful to lose. So it's kind of curious. So there is going to be for sure a high stakes Supreme Court battle over this. And I foresee it's going to go into the courts and it's going to take some time to resolve. And most likely it's going to get settled out of the court. So that's what I think is going to happen. But yeah.
All right, guys. So we had one more topic. I'll just quickly touch upon that because to me that this is more like comic relief than anything else. But I guess yeah, we are a little over time, so we don't have to go over this one. Congratulations, Toronto. You are the most like the safest place to drive in Ontario. And they have pretty much defined Toronto like very narrowly, right? Like no Mississauga, no Markham, no all the other things that surround Toronto. I don't know how they conducted this study. I have driven in Toronto. I've had the pleasure of driving on Don Valley Parkway, on Gardner Expressway, on whatever that highway is on the west side of Toronto. Like, I would love everyone to go and drive in the safest city in Ontario, and let us know in the comments what you thought. This is an experiment that we have to carry out. The Wasted Wanderers family has to go drive in the safest place in Ontario and report on their experiences, right? Anyways, guys, let's. JD, do you have any closing thoughts on this one?
No, no. I mean, I can't believe it. I think, still think it. This is like, is it some kind of satire? But yeah, let us know. Drive around Toronto. Let us know. Is it safe?
Yeah, on this one, right? We can discuss this next time. I'll pull up that report. There's a whole report on like the best cities in the world, and London, the one in UK, not in Ontario, came out on the top. I showed it to two Londoners, and they were like, "Yeah, I don't know." They could not agree. So, anyways, I think it's along those lines. And oh God, okay, here we are. So, hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, everyone. And see you guys next week, right here, again, with more exciting topics. Till then, have a great rest of the week.
Right. And we have 38 subscribers now. Let's get to 100%. Um, yeah, we're doing really great. We've gotten some great responses. So let's keep the momentum going. Everybody, have a great week ahead. See you guys next.
Bye bye.